It's the Digital Babble with your host, Flipper. Colorful commentary on your photography. Seen on fingerlakes1.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Digital Babble. It's a show about photography and Photoshop with me, Flipper, where I explain different functions and techniques both in Photoshop and photography. This week I'll be covering the mode dial function of full auto, what it does, how the camera thinks, and when to use it in the scene. And we have 3 edits where we're going to talk about a couple different types of techniques in Photoshop to select different areas, different colors, maybe do some color shifting. We'll see what happens when we get there. But if you want to check us out online, you can check us out online at fingerlakes1.com, fingerlakes1.tv. You can watch the live show every Wednesday, 7 p.m. I'm on with the Babble. We talk about photography. I already said that, so we'll move on. This whole show is really kind of a learning show. I'm going to try to get as much knowledge about different pieces for each show. So hopefully we can, like saying from this point forward, we've already covered the basics. Now we're going to start covering like scenes and dials and what each scene might be that you could use the full auto or you could use the auto on, and then how to manipulate the camera to get different types of shot, different exposures for the same type of scene. So this week we're going to focus totally on the auto or do full auto or the green rectangle on most cameras, where the camera does all the thinking. All you're doing is pulling up, focusing, and firing the shot. And hopefully we can give you some different tips and tricks on how to make the camera do what you want it to do rather than letting the camera do what it thinks it should do. So just starting off here with the full auto mode, let's flop over to the camera mode, and I have a diagram here of a typical dial with all the different symbols, and you'll see this in the upcoming shows in the next few weeks. The reason why I say that is what we'll do is we'll cover all these different modes going clockwise. So we got the green rectangle or the full auto mode, and that is highlighted there with the arrow. And then we're going to have the portrait mode coming up in a future show, the macro mode, which is the little flower, the scenic mode, which is the mountain range, and the little action guy is the sports pick. Once we get through that, then we'll go over the other direction on the mode dial and explain what to use those other modes and how the camera thinks in those modes. But this week, it's all about general shooting and full auto. So the idea behind full auto with most camera manufacturers is that it does 3 things for you. It measures the exposure across the entire frame and then tries to come up with an exposure that would be acceptable for that entire scene. So instead of having like center weighted metering or spot metering where you're metering off a particular area, it's taking the entire scene in and then saying, this is my best exposure for this particular scene. And then when you fire the shot, that's the exposure you're going to get. So that's the first thing it does, is it does do an entire scene exposure or metering to see what the exposure would be. The other thing it does is it completely calculates the shutter, the aperture, and the ISO based on those measurements in the exposure. A lot of times in auto mode, depending on the logic inside the chip, it will make determinations on whether you're really kind of looking for a fast shutter speed, a slow shutter speed, wide opening for the aperture, or a closed opening for the closed opening, or smaller opening for the aperture. That is going to really be the 2 main components that it's going to adjust. Most cameras, at least now to this generation of camera, will also calculate your best ISO. A lot of them have what they call limiters on it. So the highest ISO that the auto mode will do is 400 ISO or 800 ISO. Some don't. Like the Canon 5D, actually, if you go on full auto mode, which is very rare for a typical photographer running a Canon 5D Mark II in full auto. Usually they're kind of more aperture priority or shutter priority or whatever. So But that camera will actually calculate the ISO and do the entire range of ISO, whereas your typical point and shoot, your typical DSLR probably won't. So it'll probably have a limiter of, say, 400 or 800 to limit the amount of noise and amount of grain that you might happen to see on your photos after taking the shot. So that being said, that's the second piece of the full auto mode. The other thing that it does is it tries to find the most rounded or most common settings for what it's seeing in front of the camera. So like saying if you're taking a picture of a duck and there's a lot of water and the light is hitting the duck and the water and there's a lot of sparkles off of it, it might actually trick the camera into thinking that the scene is a lot darker, or the camera thinks it's a lot brighter. It's going to make the exposure a lot darker, and you might miss your shot, or you might get something that you weren't expecting, such as a really dark duck and really dark water with all these wonderful twinkle highlights. So that's why we have to kind of figure out how the camera actually is thinking totally with the auto mode. So let's bring it back one step here. So we get a camera, we put it on full auto mode, we pull it up to a scene, we then take the picture, and the camera thinks whatever in front of it's 18% gray. That is the standard for metering. So 18% gray, totally across the board, is what it sees. So it's taking the entire scene and saying everything in front of me is 18% gray. I'm going to calculate my shutter, I'm going to calculate my aperture, and I'm going to calculate my ISO. And then I'm going to compare it to maybe an internal database, or, you know, kind of some logic, some chip logic that would then tell me what the best or most common exposure settings for this type of scene would be. And that's what it's going to hand back to you in that respect. So maybe you're taking a sports shot, just happen to be taking a sports shot, and the camera notices that, yeah, it's a little low light, but there's movement. So let's pick up the shutter speed just a touch. How many times does the full auto mode get it right versus any of the other modes? I'd probably say you got a 50-50 shot at it, but even that's even probably being too generous at times. And the reason why I say that is because it does take the entire scene into account. So if you have some dark pieces in the background or really light pieces in the background, your subject may be totally the wrong exposure, and that's really what you're trying to capture, is that subject. So that being said, let's figure out why why don't we just label how full auto is good and bad, and then we can kind of discuss how we can make the camera do things that we want it to do on full auto. So why is it good? On full auto, you can really begin to see how your camera thinks, how it calculates exposure. You can start getting used to the settings such as shutter, aperture, and ISO. You can start seeing what your pictures are doing. So putting a camera, especially a brand new camera, on full auto when you first get it and just go out and shoot is actually quite a good thing, so that you can actually look and see on each photo what your settings are. That way you can kind of go, oh, look, that really came out neat. I really love the blur in the background. How did I get that? And then you go back and you right-click your photo on your computer and you go properties, and it'll tell you all your camera settings, such as shutter, ISO, and aperture. So you can actually then compare how you got this shot, but it didn't come out right in the next shot. And it gives you some idea of what the camera settings is thinking and how you can use those same camera settings. So that's how full auto can be really good. You can also take a variety of shots and really compare color, temperature, any setting in the camera, but it also gives you a documented kind of learning curve, or kind of a documented book per se, on what type of shots your camera can take just on full auto. So you might have some scenes that might dictate full auto is a perfect opportunity for it. It's also great for getting the shot when you're just not sure how to shoot a scene. So like saying if you're shooting a mountainscape or a landscape, okay, and you're just not sure what the real exposure is going to be or should be, you can easily take and put it on full auto, take a couple shots, kind of look at it in the viewfinder or in the LCD display on the back of the camera, look at the settings, look at the color temperature, look at the exposure, and be like, wow, I really like the way that came out, or wow, that's really, woo, you know? And from that point, it gives you a starting point where you can actually take as a photographer and modify your settings. So maybe you're like, okay, well, geez, you know, that scene was way blurry because my shutter speed was way too slow. You could then take and modify your shutter speed, and the camera would automatically try to compensate accordingly. Or you can change modes and go that route. So auto is great for getting that first shot off, just so that you can kind of comprehend where the camera and how the camera is seeing the scene. It's also great for test shots. I mean, I use a point and shoot for test shots. You'll see one that I'm going to photo edit up here. It's going to be number 3 on the photo edits, and we're going to use it for making different selections and just touching up certain parts of the photo. So you'll see that later in the show. But that photo came out horrible because the camera on full auto thought this is what the whole scene looks like. And it gave me some weird funky setting, and it was kind of a nice starter photo, but it really wasn't on the mark. You know, and that's kind of like the whole test shot thought process. Let's take a test shot, full auto, whack, see what it looks like. All right, pull up, bang. It looks good, it doesn't look good. Okay, it looks good, but we need to do whatever. And that's the whole thing about photography. Photography as an art and photography as a technical art. And I think that's where I classify it mostly, because I am kind of fairly technical in the sense that I love knowing how something works. You look at me and give me a pastel and say, draw something, I'd be like, what? This looks like a brownie, let's try eating it, you know? Not so in the camera age, because I kind of comprehend that a little bit better. You know, so you'll never see me draw or paint or anything. I'll paint in Photoshop and fix photos, but you won't ever see me doing paintings. So that's kind of the big difference between like the technical art versus just art, or painting as an art, or some other piece of art. It kind of gives, it's the technical piece of it, I think, and that's where I'm trying to get at it. And you know, some people argue, you know, there's philosophical debates about whether it's art or not, and you know, so on and so forth. I believe it's art. I think a lot of people believe it's art. Every person carrying a camera, whether it's on full auto or not, it's your vision, it's your piece of, it's your photo, it's what you saw as that scene should be. So now, why is full auto bad? So we can explore a little bit of this. Full auto is bad in the sense that, one, you lose full control or full creative control over capturing the scene in front of the camera. In other words, if you want to blur out the background, full auto might not do that for you. It's kind of a hit or miss. It's kind of like, hey, let's try it. Oh, it didn't work. You know, so full auto as a test shot, great. Once you start getting creative and you want to do a particular thing and you understand, okay, well, I need a lower number on my aperture to blur out the background, or I need a higher number aperture to make everything sharp from front to back, get that depth of field. That's where I think, you know, full auto is horrible. You really have to kind of get back into the idea of setting the camera up yourself and actually knowing what settings you want to change. The other thing about full auto that's kind of not so hot is the camera's scene evaluation might not recognize the scene for as you see it, and make recommendations that might not capture the scene the way you want it. So not only are you losing the creative control over the scene, but you're also losing that base exposure. Like in your mind, you're saying, hey, this is an action shot, I need to have a fast shutter. It might not see it as an action shot. That's where all the other modes and all the other parts of that dial come into play. And the last thing is, it leaves you 100% to the decision of the camera, rather than using your camera as the tool that it can be and let you make the decisions. So that's kind of where the kind of bad. So I got a few examples of running things in full auto. So let's like this little guy. You've probably seen this mannequin before. I've mentioned it in previous shows, and I love these little guys because you can pose them and do stuff and check your lighting and see how the exposure is going to be. Now, all I did was I pulled up and took a full auto shot and shot it. And you'll kind of notice that it's pretty bland, but maybe a couple things that I would have changed. I might have darkened the photo just a touch because you can see the grain in this. You know, and that background should probably just be a little bit darker. That way you don't see the digital noise in the background. I also might have tried to maybe shallow up the depth of field, maybe get some blur from front to back. And this is a very simple full auto. This is what you can use it for. You can get that first test shot, and then you can look at it and say, I want to change this, this, and this, and this. And then you do it. So like I said, simple shot. It's I like to call full auto the snapshot mode, but you know, some people might find that offensive because it's really not just snapshot. You can do a lot of creative things in full auto if you understand how to make the camera work for you. So let's get into one more example here. This is another full auto shot. I didn't know what to do with this scene. It's just a bunch of teddy bears. I had a couple different lights going on. I wanted to see what it was going to look like before I started messing around with lighting and so on and so forth. And it's so funny because this is just a pile of teddy bears and cows, and I think there's a cat and a dog in there. Maybe it's just all teddy bears. I can't remember, but I know there's a cow in there because I see him right there. But that whole let me see what it looks like first. And I can tell you right now, two things that I don't like about the way the lights were set up. The lighting made everything kind of sheen, so there's kind of like this kind of light color to everything. It lacks a lot of depth and tonal value, but there's a lot of hot colors in here. You got that hot green there, you got the hot pink, you got that purple, and of course you got the white colors, but the white color is going to be white. But it's definitely a hot color temperature, very bright colors. So it was a good test shot. Now I could go back and say, well, geez, if I just take and make the shutter speed just a touch faster, lower the flash a little bit, and this is a great starting point. Now, ways that we can fix the auto brain into thinking that we want to do something different. On your camera, there might be something called exposure control or exposure compensation. That you can take and tell the camera that the scene in front of it is darker or lighter than it thinks it is. So there's one way you can do it. Another way you can do it, which is a great technique for learning how to tell the camera to look at something else and then shoot what's in front of the camera, is saying if you know that the exposure is going to be, maybe you got something white in the scene, like a white wall. You can then aim the camera at the white wall, see what the light value is, and say, okay, that's my exposure. Okay, then rotate back while holding that shutter speed or finding the lock button. There is a lock button on most cameras. So you'll lock your exposure over here, come back, recompose the scene, and then take the shot. This way, it's actually going to take the exposure for the white wall and not get confused by whatever's in front of the scene of the camera. One other great technique of trying to trick the camera on full auto to take shots that you want to take is to actually take and recompose the scene to a tighter, more confined scene. So like saying you have a single subject, like the mannequin idea. You could actually take and fill that mannequin into the entire scene because that's what you really are looking for the shot, and the camera will actually find the exposure that would be perfect for that shot. So there's a few different techniques for, you know, tricking the camera into submission. It's going to submit to your will as a photographic artist and make that happen. So if you got any questions on this or any other topic, or you want to just talk to me about the show or whatever, or ask questions, or send me photos that I can use in Photoshop, or, you know, use as photo edits. Maybe you got a portrait that you were just dying to see what it would look like if we do something with it. You can send me an email at thedigitalbabble@gmail.com. Send me your photos, send me your questions, send me your comments, and I might read them on air. Everything's anonymous unless you tell me to go ahead and say your name on air or whatever. So please send those in. And hopefully you like us on Facebook, and you know, share shows. If you find something useful, share it with somebody else. These are, I think I got a lot of information to give, and hopefully we can do it. So let's get right into our first photo for Photoshop. Now, This first technique that I wanted to work with is how to make specific selections and localize your edits and limiting the edits. So that way, when we're working on a photo, such as this one that's up on scene, I can actually look at this and go, okay, I want to fix these three things. I want to fix the blue color in the plate, okay? Because the white color here in the cream or whatever this is here, it looks like maybe it's oranges. You know, so I'm not sure what kind of cream that would be or what type of sauce that would be, but maybe it's white chocolate. Who knows? And it's a goose. It looks like it's a pastry of some sort, but I love this shot. And my buddy sent this to me and said, hey, listen, could you do something with this? I said, sure, why not? So that's why it's here on the show. So I see that there's a lot of blue here as well in the plate, and I'm pretty sure that plate is not blue. You know, it's probably white because it looks like they're at a restaurant and they're having dinner or dessert. Also, I really like the idea of taking this background and darkening it up just a touch. So we got to figure out how to do a localized edit on that. And then one thing that we can do is lower the highlights here. So like here, we're really bright on this highlight. We're really bright on this highlight. Maybe we'll just tone that down just a touch, just so it brings it back into balance just a touch. The other thing we could really do, let me clear the whiteboard, we could localize the edits to the plate right here. And I'll show you that technique here in just a second. That's kind of neat too. So let's get right into Photoshop. As you can see, our little ducky here is already up on screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can't find or get just this localized area over here, and we'll see if we can't correct this brown smudgy of, I'm assuming, chocolate. So let's see what we get here. So what we're going to do is we're going to first make a square marquee around it so that we know that we're only going to affect this part of the picture. Okay, I'm actually going to duplicate the background layer. I always forget to do that on the show because I'm trying to hurry through these. But I'm going to duplicate the background layer. That way the final background layer is the untouched photo, and then every layer above that is things that I've made changes to. This way I can always go back. So let's see if we can't, like, maybe grab this somehow and maybe fix it one way or the other. So now let's try copying it. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this, and we're going to make a new layer, and we're going to paste it. Now, if I turn off all the other layers, the only thing I'm going to work on is that little section of that layer. And this is a great way to localize your edit. So let's take and grab, why don't we try the spot healing brush first? Let's make it a little bigger so we can use it. And we'll try just kind of toning this out here just a little bit, see if we can't get rid of it. No, that's not going to work very good, I don't think. Yeah, it's still retaining the color. Not so good. So that, you know, you can use the spot healing brush. You can use the clone stamp brush if you're good at the clone stamp brush. I don't mind using the clone stamp brush, but it takes time to really work this in and out, as you can see here. And then you got to reblend it and make sure that you don't goof up the tones. We're going to grab this here and kind of put on the plate a little bit. Grab some more here and just kind of edge the plate out here, just touch. All right. And as you can see, I'm literally doing a localized edit and just kind of grabbing the plate again and just slowly editing this out. Now this could take a while, depending on what type of edit you're trying to do. It might take a while. You know, we can make this kind of interesting and just kind of like, okay, do this. Now another way to do this is we could take the not the quick select, but the magic wand tool, which is over here in the toolbar here. It's a little magic wand. We can actually take and see if we can't find that color. So as you can see, I clicked on it, it highlighted it with ants. I could actually take and kind of do all of that. That took too much. That took too much. How about here? All right, let's try to grab some more, yeah. Lower the tolerance just a touch. Now the neat thing with the magic wand is that, you know, depending on how high your tolerance is and what color you pick will depend on what you're actually going to see here. Now what we could do is we could actually take and make an adjustment just to that selection. So we're going to go image adjustment, and maybe we're going to do the hue and saturation, and we're going to get rid of the color. So it's pretty much like the plate back there. Maybe we're going to lighten it or darken it. Probably lighten it up just ever so slightly. Someplace around there. Maybe shift it to the blues a little bit. Maybe we're going to colorize it. You never know. We could colorize it a little bit here. And just ever so slightly get a little color and make it bluish. Trying to match the color of the plate. Bluish gray. Lighten it up someplace in there, I guess. But, you know, without spending all day trying to fix just a smudge spot, that's how you would localize your edit in this type of scenario. So you could easily just copy out a paste an area and then fix it, and then when you rebring back the other layers, you know, you will see now the fixed plate, or per se the fixed plate. So that is definitely one way of doing it. Another way of doing localized editing, select, deselect, is we could actually draw. So I'm going to hit the undo back to the magic wand area, clone stamp. Let's see. Well, I guess I'll go back to all the way back to the original here. So here we are back at the original, and I'm going to make it my duplicate layer first. Now we know that we got shapes here, so we could actually take and do like a polygon selection tool. And by using this polygon selection tool, oh, that is not the polygon selection tool. There we go. I wasn't paying attention. Let's see here. Polygon selection tool. So we know we got shapes right here where we can kind of outline the duck. And you'll see where this technique will come in really handy later on, especially with portraits. So you'll see that I'm taking and I'm actually going to get right on the plate here. So I can capture those stains. Now, what I've done here, and I think I'm going to do it this way maybe. I'll do it back to the original. So there's my selection. Now what we can do now is we could take the patch tool, which is under the spot healing and that sort of area. And we take the patch tool and try grabbing a different section of the plate. You know, and sometimes it's tough to find a blank section of the plate. Sometimes you work in too big of an area. And like I just took too big of an area, I don't know where I'm going to get the section of plate that's going to work well with this. So let's try that. Let's see what that does. Now that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, but at least it's a little better. We can try again here. See if we can get something a little better. Nope, that just totally ruined the plate. So you don't like the outcome, you just go back through your history and undo. Another technique we could do to get rid of that smudge is we could actually take and localize blur this. So we selected it. Now we could take and do like a really heavy blur or something, so like a Gaussian blur. So let's do a little heavier. We want to really make that stain kind of disappear. And it keeps somewhat of the tonal values, okay? Now we could take and do another image adjustment and actually get rid of the color. So let's do hue and saturation, and we'll start to desaturate and see if we can't match the color, the tone. It ain't gonna happen because it's kind of blue. I keep thinking it's red. Yeah, the stain's kind of reddish. So select, deselect. So I mean that would be, like I said, this is a very quick edit. I mean I would spend a lot more time trying to get this to, but that's another way to take out smaller things. So I'm going to go back and we're going to just do a quick Photoshop of this real quick just to clean it up without doing any selections there. We're going to do, the next things that we're going to do is we're going to actually select based on tonal values. So let me see what else we got for images here. That's kind of neat. That's that one there. Okay, so we'll stick with this one for right now. So what we can do now is we can actually take and say, let's select based on color or color range. So you go to select, color range, and this is so neat because what you can do now is you can select a particular color and then it gives you a black and white preview here in the middle of the screen. So let's grab that brownish chocolate color. you'll notice that it kind of selected it right here, and it's kind of pretty darn close. Let's see what it does to the selection. Not as good as I thought it would be. So let's try again. Select, color range. We've got a fuzziness here. Okay, so let's try that color. Nope. How about this color? Nope. Maybe my fuzziness is too high. Let's try turning it down a little bit. We want the brown color. So there's that. Now we're going to add some more color to it. We want that color. We want this color. Now let's see what we got. And it's so weird because sometimes the ants don't draw where it should. So I'm going to... Oops, I don't want to do that. Do this. Get rid of all the other selections here. So what I'm doing is I'm holding the Alt key and selecting the square marquee. That way it gets rid of all the other selections out here. Now what we can do is we could try doing some of the adjustments that we did before. So like saying we could go image adjustments and maybe hue and saturation again, desaturizing those areas, making the shift up or down. As you can see, there's some areas in there that are kind of changing, but really I still didn't get it. But that is a really neat way to do, like saying select, deselect. Like saying if we really want to select the color range, and instead of colors, we can select the highlights. You'll notice here in this black and white selection here, you'll see that it kind of shows you this highlight area. So now what we can do is, now we got the selection. Now what we can do is we can do an adjustment layer, such as levels or curves, and then we can decide what we want to do with just that area, and it automatically masks that area out. As you notice, I can change very drastically or just a little bit. So maybe I just don't like that the highlights are so bright. Maybe I want to darken them up. I can just slide the mid-tone slider without banding the selection one way or the other, just to drop or raise the exposure. So I'm going to drop it just a touch. So I'm going to go probably 95, 96, someplace in there. And then I'm also going to take the white slider and drop the highlights down just a touch here. Oh, well, I guess I can't. I'm going to use the white slider here just to bring the, on the tonal value, the output value slider here, I'm going to actually tone down those whites just a touch so that they come back and check so they look like they belong part of this picture. Like so. Alright, so there's first edit. So we calm down the highlights. Now what we can do is we can go back in and do another color range. So select color range. And now we're going to tackle the shadows. So you'll see that the background is really mostly the shadows. There's some pieces in different areas here. We're going to say, okay, fine. We'll take what it thinks the shadows is. And we're going to take a levels and we're going to kind of play with those shadows back there. So I'm going to see what I want to do. I want to maybe darken up the background a bit. Notice how the rest of my photo is getting a little too dark as well. So what we can do is we know that we're getting the shadows pretty good, but maybe we want to just paint back out the areas that we don't want to touch. So back here in this levels adjustment, we can then take and click on the mask and then basically paint over with the black. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way with the brush here. Hang on. Alright, so we're going to paint black wherever we don't want that adjustment to happen. So we don't want it to happen in the goose here. And we're going to shrink the brush here real quick, and we're going to go up and around the goose's head. And bring back that all like so, and down around the goose's neck. So like so. Now to clean that up, we just swap back to white, and then we'll go along the edge here just to make sure it gets dark again. And shrink the brush up just a touch here and go down through here. And around this way. And maybe we want to do a little bit over here because I ended up going on the butt here and getting the cop. So there we go. So now we darkened up the background. We toned down the highlights. I'm still kind of reeling about this highlight adjustment. It just does not like me in this one. So we've got both those things kind of taken care of. Working. Let's see what it looks like. It's all black, so that is not right. So delete, and we go back to select, color range, highlights. Let's try this again. Okay. We're selected. I'm going to do an adjustment layer. Levels. It picked it. I'm going to darken it just a touch. I'm going to lower the output, and I'm going to call it done. And there it is. Okay, that time it worked. And the so the levels come out, you know, and so let's take the. Why don't we just save this one, and we'll go back in and save as. And we're gonna save it as a JPEG back under the new. Yep, save. Yep. Okay, let's take a look at it on the big screen. See what the changes were. So the original looked like this, and the edited one looks like this. We darkened the background here. I was going to try to clean up that stain, but taking a little longer, a little more complex of an edit. And then we toned down those highlights. So original, really bright on the highlights here. Background is very bright, and you can see everything. Maybe you want to get rid of this person's arm over here. And here's the edits again. So very isolated, brings that particular food piece out and isolates it accordingly. And that's how you can do localized edits and selections. And limiting your edits. Let's see. So let's get into the second photo here, which is another picture by my friend here. Just the temple god, sun god or something. I don't know. It was some type of temple that they visited. So he took this picture of the temple here, and maybe what we want to do is we want to accentuate the temple here, and we want to get some contrast, but we don't want to overdo it. So a really good way of doing that is localizing a mask or localizing a selection so that it doesn't overpower or take away from different pieces of this. So get into Photoshop here, and we'll go over to that photo, and we're going to zoom in here, and what we're going to do is we're going to try doing a normal kind of curves adjustment, and we're going to take and we're going to do the increased contrast. So that kind of looks neat, but it also took and made all the midtones kind of really weird. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go back and we're going to use that same technique that I used just a little bit ago, and we're going to take and go select color range, and we're going to select our highlights or our shadows, I'm sorry, and you'll see here it shows a lot here for the shadows. You can click on image and it'll kind of give you the image, but really the selection, the black and white selection of the mask is really what you're looking for. So there's our shadows. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in and do a levels, and you can see this is the shadow area, and this is what the curve looks like for the shadow area. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually bring this darker. You can do some funky things with this too. Let's go back to 1, and we're going to darken it up here just a little bit. We're just going to bring the shadow slider in just a little bit so the darks are dark. We're also going to darken up the shadows just a touch, not too much. So it accentuates these creaks and crevices and kind of gives us some definition. So there's our first edit, okay? So now our next edit, what I want to do is I want to do select color range, and we're going to go to highlights. All right, and we're going to pump these guys up so we get that contrast going. Really, I'm not seeing too much where I really want the highlights to be, so maybe we need to do midtones. Now we can see some of this stuff. So let's brighten the whole picture up with midtones here. So we're going to go back up to levels, and we're going to do a little bit. There's our midtones, and we're going to pump just the midtones up without affecting the shadows. We're going to make them a little more contrasty, and we're going to lighten them up a touch. There. So now you kind of really get the feel for that face in the stone. So that is really a great tool, especially for doing that kind of localized edit, is to go to select and color range and grabbing just certain pieces of it, and then, you know, coming back and, you know, just doing those local edits. And, you know, really, you know, you could probably crop this one too. I'm going to do that anyway, because I just like the idea of cropping it. So let's crop this like, I don't know, We'll put them dead center. Straighten out the picture a little bit. Boom, there we go. Zoom back in. File, save. Well, save as is going to do it. Okay, so we go back to our original. There's our original. Here's our edit. So quite a bit of difference here in the tonal values in the eyes and the mouth. It's a lot darker, more contrast. The mid-tones are brightened up a little bit, but yet retain that color value. So here's the edit, and then we cropped it. So there's 3 different edits in Photoshop to play with, and that's where we got. All right, so image number 3. This is that bad auto shot that I was telling you about earlier that I took. I literally picked up the camera, pointed it out the door, and shot it. As you can see here, there's a lot of shallow, what I would consider shallow tones. Like everything is about the same tone. It's lit fairly evenly, but there's just a lack of excitement here. There's not a lot of contrast. There's not a lot of tonal shifts. It's really kind of almost a monochrome picture, but with color. It's just so the range of color and tones is so narrow that there's just no excitement. So what we can do with this though is we can grab and select different areas to spruce up or change. So let's pop into Photoshop. And let's try doing a couple of different types of edits. We're going to try doing a select, and we're going to do the color range again. And maybe I just want to pop the color green. So I can actually, we'll make the fuzziness just a little bit higher, so 40. And we're going to try to find something really green here. And that looks like the really green area there. So we're going to grab that. We're going to do an adjustment layer. We're going to do a hue and saturation, and we're going to pump up the saturation so we can see it, hopefully. Whoops, I misclicked. You can lighten it and darken it. Wow. Maybe we're going to shift it towards the green a little bit more. Heck, you can even colorize this and give it a whole nother meaning. You can actually colorize your own grass. Maybe we don't like the brightness. We're going to tone it down just a touch. We got a little too much saturation here. We don't want to make it look unnatural. And right about there. So we got a nice green lawn now, right? A little darker. There you go. Maybe a little less saturated because we don't want to get too saturated because we don't want to make it look fake like this. We want to really keep it kind of in the realm of possibilities. What color is my grass today? I don't know, probably 26, 25. That's kind of neat. Now, all I've done so far is I've taken and selected a color range that looked like it was about green, took a hue and saturation adjustment layer on that selection, desaturated it a little bit, shifted the colors, and darkened it just a touch. And there you go. That's a great example of localized edits or selective edits. Maybe next we want to play with the actual street. So we can do the magic wand, see if we can get the street. Oh, look, that worked fairly well. I'm just going to turn off, I'm just going to try selecting the whole thing here, see if we get it. Okay, we get it pretty close. That's pretty decent. We can then hit edit, copy, and then make a new layer and go edit, paste. Now, again, okay, you know what I did wrong? Edit, undo. I was on the wrong layer. We have to be on the background layer to do that edit, copy, and edit, paste. So edit, copy. Go back up here to the top layer and edit, paste. All right, so now all I've got is what I was playing with before, just a street there. Now what we can do is we can actually take on this layer and do an image adjustment, and now we can do a lot of different things to it. Maybe we don't like that it's bluish. Maybe we want to make it black and white because it's really a gray road. All right, so we know the blues are the lighter, darker part of this part of the image. So we're going to make the road a little bit darker, not too much. And maybe we'll put some highlights back in by using the cyans up a little bit. So there we go. There's our finished product. That's what we like. And all we're doing is touching the road. Now we add in the other pieces. And now you can see, now it looks like I'm on a dirt road instead of on a, you know, paved road. You don't like that, then we can always take another adjustment. So image adjust tones there, or adjustments to hue and saturation. Maybe we want to make it more red. So we're going to colorize it. We're going to go to red. Brown. Ooh, that might work. All right. A little less saturation here. A little darker, lighter. Now I got a country road going in front of my house, and all I've done is touched, you know, just that shade or that color. Now there are some things in the background up here that, you know, anomalies that have happened because I was doing quick selection. You can get rid of those just by taking the eraser brush and erasing that area up there. So let's take the eraser brush and just erase that area up top there. And notice the color comes back to the way it's supposed to be. And again, I mean, there's so many different things you can do with Photoshop. And I mean, this is just giving you some different ideas and techniques of how to select, how to change, how to modify. And I'm going to tell you, I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't always get it right the first shot. Sometimes it takes several edits before I get what I'm looking for. Or maybe I'm kind of experimenting a little bit and trying to find what tones I really want. So let's hit File, Save. And we're going to do the JPEG piece. And we hit Save again. Okay. Now, let's go take a look at the before and the after. So the before, here is that dull, kind of monotonous, analogous kind of photo. There's not a lot of depth to the picture. There's not a lot of tone depth. There's lacking some excitement, you know, so on and so forth. Let's spruce it up a little bit with local edits. And what we did was we selected the grass. We found some green. I think I selected right in this area here. And that gave me a good selection on the green. I pumped up the green color, made it a little bit more vibrant, a little brighter, or a little darker so it looked brighter. Then we selected the road up here and made the road, instead of this blue color, we actually kind of tried to find maybe more of a woody color, kind of like right here. So here's the before. Whoops. Let me clear the whiteboard. Here's the before. Here's now the after. Notice there's a big difference in tone. There's a big difference in color values. And it was all done with local edits. I'm only locally editing certain pieces of a photo. So I edited the grass. I edited the road. Here's the before again. Here's the after. So that's pretty much it for this week's show. Thank you for joining me here on the Digital Babble. I just want to say that I hope you enjoyed it, and if you want to see more, please visit our website over at fingerlakes1.com or fingerlakes1.tv. We're going to be getting a new domain name, hopefully, very soon. And you can catch all our shows and any how-tos and writings that I'm doing for how to do different things in Photoshop or photography. If you'd like to email me photos, please send the emails to thedigitalbabble@gmail.com. If you want to get your comments or questions on air, please send them to me. And like always and every week, I just want to say I wish everybody the best. We're on every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. right here on fingerlakes1.tv, and I will be seeing you on the flip side.
A Flipside studio production. It's the Digital Babble. Tune in every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on fingerlakes1.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter.